Finally, it's an appropriate time to discuss the Old Tales event in Nikke Goddess of Victory. If you've stumbled onto this video here, know that this is part of a larger series where I blaze through the main story, and Dai-chan analyzes what we cover without fear of spoilers. By that I mean she's willing to spoil stuff. That way, it appeals to both newcomers and veterans. Old Tales is definitely one of the game's best events, and I'm excited to share it with you. In Chapter 30, the commander befriended a masked Nikke named Grave. We find out that her coffin, which is actually a medical device of some kind, contains the sleeping body of Cinderella. Of course, many know her by her other name, Anichiro, the first heretic. How did things come to this? Let's find out. Old Tales occurs in and around the previous Red Ash event, as well as Ark Guardian. During the Rapture invasion, hope for humanity came with the formation of the Goddess Squad. These special combat models, led by the prototype Nikke Lilyweiss, were the first of their kind to really make a dent in the Rapture onslaught. Cinderella herself had the goddesses to thank for saving her life back when she was a human. Even though they were a band of misfit goofballs, they bravely faced the Raptures and won. Cinderella watched them in action. To her, they were the epitome of beauty. Hoping to be like them, Cinderella applied to become a Nikke, completing countless tests so she'd be the best possible candidate. It was her dream to one day fight alongside the goddesses, to share the fame of being a fellow Goddess of Victory. Nikkes like Red Hood, Snow White, Dorothy, and Rapunzel were what we call Grimm's models, a series of Nikkes created through the cooperation of Elysium, Macilis, and Tetra. Cinderella's application came just in time for the development of a second generation of Grimm's models, allowing her to become its star. The one making this new series was Ave, spelled Abe, but spoken as Ave, like there's a V in there or something. She's a researcher and technician who allowed herself to become a mass-production Nikke just so she could keep working without sleep. For many, this would cause a mind switch, but Ave's ego was tied to her productivity. She was a genius, creating not just Cinderella, but the rest of her Grimm's partners, Little Mermaid and Red Shoes. Ave's ambition knew no bounds, prompting her to create 2 more Nikkes without authorization, Hansel and Gretel. Cinderella, however, was Ave's masterpiece, the strongest of her kind. Despite this, Cinderella and her comrades found themselves on standby. Their generation was funded by a joint effort between the United Forces of Humanity and the VTC. With various bigwigs involved in the process, they would feud over when the new Grimms should debut. Until then, Cinderella continued to watch reports on the Goddess Squad, yearning to be just like them. Ave wasn't the most sentimental type, lacking the guts to admit she thought Cinderella was already far more beautiful than any of the goddesses. Nevertheless, she would continue to watch over her best creation with full anticipation. Mind you, this notion of beauty wasn't solely cosmetic. Cinderella appreciated inner beauty above all else. Strength of will, confidence, and courage all contributed to someone's beauty. To that end, she considered Ave beautiful too, mass production model or otherwise. Despite lacking in the combat department, Ave took care of her children, coming off as an annoyed babysitter. To be fair, these Nikkes were quite the handful. Little Mermaid, nicknamed Siren, rarely ever spoke. This was because her power, Kotodama, could force humans, Nikkes, and raptures to obey her commands. It's very much akin to Lelouch and his Gia's powers. Technically, they're an extension of her main ability, Spindrift, a type of liquid Siren could control with her mind. Like Ave, Red Shoes was a former VTC researcher. She also happened to be a high-ranking priestess in the church. Again, very little is ever mentioned about the religious aspects of Nikke's world building, but in this case, it was clear that Red Shoes had a certain vision she wanted to preach, and sought to become a goddess of victory so her words would hold more influence over the masses. Her legs were, as the name implied, big red shoes powered by jet propulsion, which allowed her to deliver powerful kicks. Hansel and Gretel were 2 twins who considered themselves inseparable. Between them, Hansel would do most of the talking, relaying Gretel's feelings on her behalf. The two fought in tandem with a shared weapon, the Witch's Cauldron, which fired off concoctions of their own conjuring. They mixed their ammo like one would brew a potion, allowing them to customize their attacks. Ave's laboratory contained a separate device which kept a running total of raptures on the surface. Because there were always more raptures being created than killed, the display showed infinity rather than an actual number. This made it all the more frustrating that these Nikkes, the Old Tales Squad, weren't being mobilized. After some impressive test results, however, Cinderella was finally assigned her first mission, a joint operation with her beloved Goddess Squad. It was her dream come true. Their aim was to take out the Queen, but that first meant securing the giant orbital lift leading to the Queen's space station. Because it was the most densely populated rapture hive, Cinderella was needed to clear a path for the goddesses. Too excited to sleep, she joined Red Shoes for a cup of tea. Red warned her not to go all fangirl on the Goddess Squad, and to instead present herself as an equal. The next morning, Ave and Red Shoes teamed up to perform some last-minute maintenance on Cinderella to make her as beautiful as possible for the operation. This was the beginning of the end for Cinderella's dreams. Soon, the goddesses had arrived, and everyone walked through the hallway to greet them. Suddenly, Cinderella ran into a wall and confusedly began to see her own body in third person. Her consciousness was locked away in some void where she could only watch as her weapons, glass slippers, opened fire on her teammates. A pair of red glowing eyes indicated she had been corrupted. Siren tried to stop her with Kotodama, only to be punched in the jaw and beaten to a pulp. Red Shoes had her legs torn off, while the twins had their arms severed. Then, with a piercing shriek, Cinderella emitted a rapture calling signal before breaking out of the facility. She went on a killing spree as the world's first heretic, Anichiro. Cinderella cried out, desperately trying to break through her mental prison. Ultimately, though, Anichiro sabotaged the very mission she was meant to star in. Her body, now improved by the raptures, was strong enough to repel the Goddess Squad, destroying all hope of reaching the lift. At that point, humanity decided the surface was a lost cause. The VTC and UFH merged into the central government and turned their hopes towards the Ark underground. Cinderella's will faltered when seeing herself fight the goddesses. She allowed the corruption inside to gaslight her into thinking she was actually helping the Goddess Squad. In time, her desire to appease the goddesses became an obligation to serve the Rapture Queen. Paranoid, the central government began to worry that the other second-generation Grimm's models were corrupted as well. Ave had survived Anichiro's initial assault and barely managed to revive Red Shoes, Siren, and the twins over the span of 2 months. In an effort to lay low, she cut the lines on her communications device and claimed that fixing it was beyond her knowledge. She didn't have the heart to tell her children that they too were being hunted as potential threats. The Old Tales Squad could hardly believe what had happened. They'd never seen corruption like this before, nobody had, and they couldn't fathom why Cinderella would betray them. The idea of having to fight her was unbearable. Red Shoes, like an idiot, found the severed comms line and easily fixed it. Before long, the military officer Oswald arrived with soldiers armed with anti-Nikke rounds, specifically designed to hunt Anichiro. By now, we're very familiar with Oswald, and know he didn't want to fight. Instead, he explained that the central government only wanted to inspect them for corruption. A new technology, the brain scan, could exonerate them. On the contrary, Red Shoes noted that brain scans were still experimental and often killed the Nikkes involved. Despite Oswald assuring them that wasn't the case, Old Tales decided to resist arrest. Siren's Kotodama froze the soldiers, allowing Ave to tase them unconscious. Left without many options, Ave and her children chose to find Anichiro, hoping to reason with her. However, as one would expect, this resulted in them fighting. Even though it was 4 Nikkes against 1 heretic, Anichiro held her own thanks to those rapture modifications. During the fight, Ave called out to Cinderella, only to get shot in the leg. Still, she kept approaching as Anichiro toyed with her, intentionally missing all her vitals. Up close, Ave grabbed part of glass slippers and turned it around. Its mirrored surface reflected Anichiro's face back at her. Seeing herself, Cinderella's consciousness awakened once more, begging to be set free. The corruption's inner voice, however, assured her resistance would only cause more pain, in turn endangering her friends. Cleverly, Cinderella chose to obey this voice, so long as it only prioritized eliminating the goddess squad. Essentially, she was betting on losing to her role models. Having them kill her would be preferable to remaining a monster. As we know from the Red Ash event, the goddesses did in fact defeat Anichiro. In the aftermath, her body was taken to a special heretic research center, where scientists attempted to figure out her weaknesses. One of their attempts involved a Vaphaus injection, which was advertised back then as a heretic killer. Instead, this destroyed Anichiro's nymph, allowing Cinderella to regain control. At that time, nobody knew Vaphaus could cure corruption, so none of the scientists believed she was actually better. Rather, they continued their experiments, burning, slicing, stabbing, and freezing her, just to see what would prove efficient in combat. They justified their cruelty by recalling all the people she killed. In turn, Cinderella accepted this treatment as her punishment. After losing to Anichiro, Eve and her squad gave in and let the central government inspect them. Despite their fears, tests actually showed their innocence. With a bit more freedom, Eve was able to gain access to the research lab and confirm that Cinderella was conscious again. During her visit, though, a horde of raptures attacked the facility, forcing an evacuation. Eve took advantage of this chaos to rescue Cinderella and take her back to a private bunker. Unfortunately, even though the raptures were at fault, the central government was convinced Anichiro destroyed the lab after calling the raptures there. For the first time in forever, Cinderella was able to eat some soup, but couldn't help but cry into it. How could she ever atone? Understandably, her squad mates were still afraid of her. It would take time to regain their trust. Red Shoes, however, proved more stoic than the others. In private, Red began to ask about all the juicy details of being a heretic. She came off kind and considerate, at first anyway, but then started getting way too excited. When called out on this, Red Shoes casually admits to creating the corruption virus. I suppose it's more accurate to say she perfected it. As a human, Red worked alongside Rapunzel, looking for a way to help mankind. To herself, however, Red Shoes thought it would be much easier to just side with the raptures. At first, corruption wasn't nearly as debilitating, and it would take a while for symptoms to emerge. Then Red Shoes captured a rapture and studied its corruption code. It was simple enough that she could understand and even modify it. Expanding on this code, she added commands that would make Nikkes believe they were raptures. When her own coding skills reached their limit, she implanted the code back into raptures, which caused it to evolve beyond recognition. In a state of total delusion, Red Shoes considered Anichiro the ultimate symbol of peace between humans and raptures. It was all her fault. Red injected this evolved corruption code into Cinderella right before she went to fulfill her dreams. Then, fearing a brain scan would reveal her true intentions, Red Shoes even lied to convince her squad it was dangerous. Fortunately, Cinderella disagreed with the entire philosophy and melted Red's core with a single blast. Like some kind of freaky zombie, though, Red's legs started moving on their own, escaping the facility before Cinderella could destroy them. All the noise summoned Eve, Siren, Hansel, and Gretel, who couldn't help but think Cinderella had gone rogue again. Admittedly, it would have been smarter to force Red's confession to them first. Instead, they don't believe Cinderella as she tries to explain herself in a panic. Losing hope, she chose to run away, flying to a remote location on the surface where the cloudless sky met on the horizon. Eve figured Cinderella would hide at this spot and came to find her. Despite how bad things were earlier, Eve still believed in her greatest masterpiece. Their story may have been tainted, but it wasn't over yet. They could rewrite things to have a happy ending. After all, becoming a heretic wasn't Cinderella's fault, and within Eve's eyes, she was still as beautiful as always. Eve reminded Cinderella that beauty wasn't skin deep. You had to look for a person's true self to ascertain their beauty. Forced to confront what made her want to be a Nikke in the first place, Cinderella regained her confidence, vowing to become her true self with Eve as her mirror, always seeing the most beautiful goddess in the world. Rather than plead with the central government or wait until the dust settled, Cinderella insisted on killing the queen. To pull this off, she wanted help from her squad mates. Conveniently, they showed up alongside Oswald on orders to eliminate Enichiro. She'd become a concrete symbol for humanity to project their hatred onto. Killing her would bring positive morale. Of course, that was all a scapegoat for the masses and those in power. As her killers, the Old Tales squad could go on to be heroes, regardless of the truth. However, Oswald liked the idea of them killing the queen better. He'd already done his own research into Red Shoes, confirming her sin. This allowed Cinderella and her teammates to all get on the same page, hug things out, and proceed together. Like a total bro, Oswald gave Ave a tablet with potential hiding spots on the surface. He was willing to disobey orders for the hope that would come from knowing corruption could be cured. That said, there was still something that worried him. Vaphaus killed around 98% of Nikke's nymph. That remaining 2% could theoretically repopulate itself and trigger corruption again. Even so, he was willing to remain optimistic. Thus, Ave and Old Tales headed straight for the lift while the rest of mankind was occupied with Operation Ark Guardian. This was an opportune time, as most raptures would be targeting the Ark rather than guarding the Queen. Despite this advantage, the lift was still swarming with opposition. Hansel and Gretel launched an anti-matter blast at the raptures siren gathered together. This provoked Red Shoes' severed legs to emerge as the event's boss fight. Before this rapture exploded, it pierced Cinderella with tentacles, attempting to renew her corruption. This time, however, Cinderella could see that Ave was watching her. She confidently shattered the wall that once blocked her. Back in action, she cleared a path to the lift. An hour's ride would take them all the way up to the space station. Even if they couldn't kill the Queen, severing her connection to the lift could stop raptures from descending to the surface. Obviously, the Queen wasn't going to just sit around and let herself be killed. From the space station, a beam of red energy poured down, melting away half the elevator. Siren, Hansel, and Gretel were sent plunging down from an absurd height. A second blast knocked Ave over the edge. Before falling, she promised Cinderella she would find her, no matter what happened. All alone, Cinderella reached the lift's highest point. In an epic showdown, she faced off against the Rapture Queen. I just wish the anime cutscene had a bit more polish, and a much better bitrate. Nonetheless, it's badass. The fight ended when the Queen launched an especially dense beam, sending Cinderella out into space through a hole it blasted through. In retaliation, Cinderella fired back a barrage that separated the station from its lift. The Queen survived, but this was the next best thing. Cinderella plunged back down to Earth, appearing as a shooting star in the sky. At that exact same moment, Lilyweiss of the Goddess Squad could see this star, right before succumbing to her wounds. The esteemed prototype fought to the bitter end, ensuring the success of Project Ark Guardian. The government considered Cinderella's lift assault a failure, ordering Oswald to purge all records of the second-gen Grimm's models. None of them realized just how much Old Tales accomplished. For 5 whole years, Ave wandered the surface avoiding raptures before finally discovering Cinderella's badly damaged body. Hansel, Gretel, and Siren were still missing, but at least there was hope for one of her children. Ave vowed to repair Cinderella, no matter how long it took. After 1 year, she completed her life support coffin using materials scavenged from the surface. 3 years after that, raptures attacked her hideout. She was never built for fighting, but stood her ground regardless. Each step took so long because Ave was suffering memory loss. She would forget how to build things and need to reteach herself again. Eventually, she found hope in some damaged Nikkes who ventured to the surface. They took Ave to their superiors, who were amazed to see such an old model still alive. Rather than trust her account of the past, however, scientists tortured her with experiments, hoping to see if she had any old tech worth selling. Deemed worthless, Ave was sent back to the surface with a horribly mangled face and damaged language circuits. Ashamed, she decided to give up the fight, but nonetheless persevered long enough to discover her old laboratory. While most of her equipment had been destroyed, she found her rapture counting display still intact. Rather than infinity, the device now showed a number. It was a large number, but it meant that raptures were no longer being sent to the surface. Cinderella didn't fail, and there was hope for humanity. The two of them could still write their happy ending. Over time, Ave's memory loss would only worsen. We can assume she found her current weapon, 7 dwarves, and bulked out into a muscle mommy while trying to protect Cinderella from other heretics. She eventually found the crystal region and planned to use it for Cinderella's revival. That's where we discovered her, and she had us call her Grave. Perhaps this is her misremembering her own name, or simply choosing a new one that sounded similar. Nikkes up to the 9th generation used artificial muscles in their bodies, and were able to strengthen them through training. Post-9th gen Nikkes start off with significant lifting and gripping abilities that don't degenerate. By the same token, they can't be improved unless a Nikke is physically remodeled or uses auxiliary equipment. The Nikkes you see exercising in the Ark mainly do so to avoid mind switches. In Grave's case, though, physical training helped her, an otherwise ordinary mass production model, become a certified badass. Anichiro has long since been cured, which explains why Grave can't stand her child being called that. Neither Rapi nor Red Hood were around to learn of Cinderella's later bravery. Thankfully, her story isn't over yet. I look forward to telling more of it, but for now, there's a lot Dai-chan has to say.
Welcome back, guys! In discussing this awesome event, I have some things that technically qualify as spoilers, but only because we don't learn about them until later. Chronologically speaking, they occur right at this time, so you may want to stick around to learn more of old tales' aftermath. During their assault on the lift, Cinderella wasn't the only one getting the last laugh. Siren also made an important contribution nobody would appreciate until much later. Presumably during her descent, she put up a massive bubble veil in the sky, which prevented the queen from being able to monitor the surface. It also cut off communication with the queen's raptures and heretics, forcing them to operate without guidance. This bubble veil was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it shielded humanity from the queen, both preventing and deterring her descent. For the longest time, she would remain in space. On the other hand, the veil made it impossible for Eden's spear to fire up at her. Dorothy, Cecil, and Johann all suspected the queen was still alive and built a massive cannon meant to blast her. The bubble veil blocks their view, so Eden's spear remains dormant until it has a clear shot. Another ominous result of old tales pertains to Red Shoes. Even though Cinderella blasted her core, Red still exists in digital form. She replicated her consciousness, giving rise to the hologram called Mirror. From the shadows, she would continue to develop more heretics in Cinderella's wake. Her second project resulted in Liberalio, who faithfully served the queen even after Siren's bubble veil cut them off. It's more or less confirmed by now that Mirror was responsible for raising Marian as the heretic Modernia, all for the purpose of replacing the Rapture Queen with someone more charismatic. I wouldn't be surprised if Mirror also had a hand in creating other heretics like Indivilia and Nihilister, though we don't have a full picture of their pasts. Another loose end comes from Hansel and Gretel, who to this day remain at large. According to Little Mermaid, the two of them have turned on humanity, but Cinderella still wants to find them either way. It's pretty obvious we'll see that reunion one day, for better or worse. I'm kind of curious to know how Snow White lost 7 dwarves. More specifically, 7 Dwarves Zero, the one that Grave comes across. This is the kick-ass weapon Snow White was developing for Red Hood, even incorporating that cool drill bit. Of course, Grave was never able to bring out its full potential, and later found it more meaningful to give to Rapi. It just would have been nice to have this stuff developed on screen. Another thing I'm not sure will be addressed is the matter of Lilith's head and body. We know that, following her death, Lilyweiss was laid to rest in a handmade coffin. While the queen could still contact raptures on the surface, she demanded they bring her Lilith's head, and later her whole body. There's still this unexplained link between Lilyweiss and the Rapture Queen. Even though the queen eventually takes over Lilith's body, we still don't know what made them so compatible in the first place. One question I can't get off my mind is how exactly heretics like Liberalia were able to communicate with their queen with Siren's bubble veil up. This could be resolved by giving us a clearer time frame of when Siren made the veil. Since that too happens off-screen, all we know is that it occurred sometime between Cinderella's showdown and the end of the Mudfish side story. I always assumed Siren set up the barrier as she fell from space, but that would have to mean Liberalia was made even earlier and only had a short span of time to hear her mother's orders. If that's true, Mirror must have been cranking out those heretics. Even if you argue that was plenty of time, we know for sure that the Queen couldn't obtain Lilith's head until after Arc Guardian. After all, Lilith wasn't even dead yet. The theft itself takes place sometime after the main Overzone story, a good while after the lift was severed. How then were the Raptures able to deliver Lilith's head to the Queen? The lift was damaged, and Siren's veil was already up by then, so how'd they do it? Am I just misunderstanding things, or do the writers have a legitimate plot hole to fill? Either way, I hope you've enjoyed the Old Tales event, either on your own or through this video. If you like this series, don't forget to subscribe and check out its playlist. Consider joining as a member to support us more directly. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Mystic Samurai 1983, Otaku Mom, Free Brick, Jugemu Unko, Lunarworks, Link Pendrago, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Kalem, Saul Soto, Major, Matal Mataru, Winter's Edge, Sneer Cachette, Thanathiel, Foxbox, Alzinga Fagan, Draco Chaotic, Caitlin P, Sith Lord 906, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X 77, Alistair Bernadotte, and Liamon 3. Thank you all so much.